Hello everyone, welcome back. This video is titled Transcend Your Survival Patterns and Come Back to Life. Right now, there are many people all over the world who are in that process where they're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. They've left the lands of Egypt, the lands of the oppression, right? And they're kind of in that wandering through the desert period, or they're still parting the Red Sea. Now, I bring up these biblical references, and I just really want to invite you, if you have any religious stuff around the Bible, to just let it go for a second and view it with me as an archetypal, metaphorical story, because if you can see it that way, you'll be able to see that it highlights the brilliance and the wisdom that's going to help you navigate this transitional period as it helped me, okay? So what is that? If you look at the story of Moses, right? He led his people out of the lands of Egypt, and he went through the Red Sea. They went through that wandering through the desert period in order to reach the promised land. Now that beautiful metaphor is highlighting the journey of consciousness that we as human beings go through. Now, a lot of people choose to not go through this journey. A lot of people actually choose to stay in the lands of Egypt under the confines of Pharaoh, which you could say is the ego identity mind that is obsessed with control and keeping you safe and where you've been and what you've known, right? You have been a slave to that for a long time, and many people are starting to break free of it, which is super exciting because, my friends, each one of us going through this process, we're going to create an entirely different planet. Because we're all connected, and everyone that's willing to do this kind of inner work and free themselves is going to feed into the collective that we all share, the collective mind, and it's going to be a light that brightens the dark that a lot of people are lost in right now. And I want to say this journey that we're all going on is the journey from personal to impersonal. This was massive for me to really understand. Because little me, boy, did I take everything personally to the point where people would be talking, somewhere in the room, and I would think they were talking about me. I would be asking myself, what did I do to upset them? Or I would even start talking shit about them, like, they don't know me, like, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, I made everything about me, which is what happens when you're residing your consciousness in the lands of Egypt and your ego's running the show. You could call the ego the false identity, the false you, the separate you that was created to keep you safe and alive. So you've got to transcend your survival patterns in order to come back to life. If you've been feeling dead, if you've been feeling stuck and your energy's been stagnant, and you don't know what to do, and things seem to get worse and worse, and there's tension, and there's not clarity going on, and you're barely keeping your head above the water, it's because you're ready to leave. You're waking up, you're ready to leave Egypt. But here's the thing, when you get to the Red Sea, this is where a lot of people turn back around and say, okay, Pharaoh, take me back. I'll be a slave again, right? Because to part the Red Sea means that you have to master your emotions. There's a reason they call it the Red Sea. Yes, there's a literal Red Sea on the planet in that area, but the metaphor of it is the Red Sea. It's your blood, it's your emotions, it's your waters, your internal waters. If you allow those to dictate what your truth is, then you can never pass through that sea, and you will go back to the cage, all right? Your body's got to come with you. You've got to be able to walk on water in this process, right? Now, let's talk about that for a second. When Moses went through, what happened? The Pharaoh's army chased them, which to me, it's like literal. If it was literal, if I'm Pharaoh and I'm any of his soldiers, I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm going in there. The oceans are literally suspended in midair. And this is not safe at all. There's no way Pharaoh could have got me to do that because it would have been a seeming certain death sentence. But what does it mean? And that's what happens, right? The oceans collapse back on Pharaoh's army and his men. Now, what does that actually mean metaphorically? It's when you start going through the Red Sea, your body is going to feel a certain way. It's going to feel very unsafe because you're leaving behind the emotional signature that became your emotional baseline, right? That became your homeostasis, where your nervous system regulated to as being normal, right? So when you cross that threshold, it's going to feel, the alarm bells are going to ring. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. This isn't safe here. We're going beyond what we've known. And that's when the ego mind, which is obsessed with control, is going to flood you with intrusive thoughts. All of the ones that have always pulled you emotionally your whole life, it's going to flood you with that, my friends. Now, for 98% of people, that's enough to snap them back into what was. And then they're like, nope, not doing that. You've got to, if you want to make it across, and that's just part one, by the way. If you want to make it across, you've got to walk on your waters, and you've got to be the loving observer of those emotions. Because guess what? Frozen in those emotions are lots of identities of the little versions of yourself that first had to take in the intensity of that emotion when it incorrectly interpreted a life scenario of I'm not safe and I'm not okay. That's what happened, right? So this is where nervous system regulation plays a key factor. You've got to train your animal body to start feeling safe. You've got to learn how to breathe when that's going on. You've got to learn how to correct the arid feeling, and you've got to learn how to allow, because you don't want to push or resist any of this. You got to allow it all in, baby. Everyone's allowed to be here. You can sit at the table. We're not in the game of resistance whatsoever when we're talking about transformation, right? Okay, so let's say you do get across the Red Sea, right? The nervous system starts to ease up a little bit. You start to feel a little bit more relaxed. The things that used to really grab you, like they did for me, holy shit. Like rent and paying bills, especially when I was homeless living out of my car, felt like I was going to die every time. Well, I guess the rent was not when I was living in my car, but after that, even when I had a house, if I was going to be late on rent or I didn't have enough money, like a couple weeks up to when rent needed to be paid, my body would start freaking out and I would start making choices from fear, and I'd start grinding away in Uber and all these other little side gig things. And none of it was building anything that was going to actually create a foundation that would land me in the promised land, right? So everything's done from fear. Everything's condensed. It's not a time to create. It's a time to survive when you're in fight or flight, right? So that's what I did. And my nervous system was just like crushed by it month after month. And it felt like there was no way to get out of it, right? So where the wisdom starts to really come in this story that I want to that I'm sharing with you, because my friends, I lived through it very deeply. I was in my car for a year and a half, and they stayed with me for many years after that, especially when I was building my own business and creating my own company that would help others lead through this process. Because then you got to deal with the who am I and the imposter syndrome, and that's a whole other arsenal that your ego digs into when you follow your heart and you say, this is what I'm here to do on the planet, right? It's going to make you face off with every shadow that's like, you could be rejected, you could be shamed, you could be, no one cares, all of it, right? Which is on YouTube, it's the same thing. It's like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and then you get like 2 views, and then you let that discourage you because it starts to hit all the stories of you not being enough and what you say doesn't matter and no one's listening, all that type of thing, right? And you realize that you got to do it for you. It's part of the journey. That's your wandering in the desert period. When you cross the Red Sea, now you're in this place of the unknown. You're like, where do we go from here? I don't really have any clarity. I feel like I'm lacking an identity. I don't really know who I am. And I feel lost. I feel like, there's no direction. And that can get very dark, right? Because then we're just kind of aimlessly wandering around and we're trying to figure it out. And the fear comes in, and we either want to run back to Pharaoh and go back through the Red Sea, or all of our victim mode stuff comes up, right? All the victim archetypes start to come up, and that's what I'll get into next. is your survival archetypes. Now, like I said, this is a journey of going from the personal small self to I am the creator, to oneness with source, with the life that is why all this is here. It's the life force, universal energy that is creating all of this right now. You're a part of it, right? You wouldn't be here if you weren't. So we have these what are called archetypes, and maybe you've heard of that before. I love Carl Jung's definition of it. He calls it units of consciousness that we all share. It's like all these different masks of the one, right? There's a ton of these different ones. Maybe you've heard of them. You know, the main ones that people know are like the warrior, the poet, the magician, the mother, the father, the hero, the sage, the victim, all of these different things, right? So we all share these. This is why it's not personal. These archetypes within the unconscious mind get activated when our nervous system gets triggered. And then all of a sudden we assume that identity, right? So when we go into our victim pattern, and we learn, by the way, these get activated when we're kids, right? And this is what keeps us in the land of slavery, in Egypt, where we don't have freedom and sovereignty. These kick on as adults, and we get pulled right back to our emotional capacity that we had as adolescents and children. And we don't realize it because we've been in that for so long, right? So the main archetypes are the victim, the wounded child, the prostitute, right? Those, and the saboteur. Can't forget about that one. That's one that probably a lot of people relate to, right? You start to take steps forward. You start to feel good about yourself. Your power starts to build. And then you sabotage yourself, right? It's like, why does that happen? Why do people do that? Why do I do that? That doesn't make any sense. Of course I want to go in this direction. It feels amazing. I love the feeling of power. Oh yeah, that archetype helped you survive as a kid. It helped you to come back to a baseline where you were just fitting in, right? Where you weren't going to stand out. You weren't going to be visible. You weren't going to be in a place where you could potentially get scrutinized by other people. You were part of the pack, right? The saboteur would come in anytime you started to venture away from that. And the victim, it's like, this is so deep, guys. It can be something like where you got love from your parents. People actually showed you attention when you were a victim, when you were sick, when you were injured, bullied, whatever the thing is. That archetype comes online and it's like, oh, that's how I feel worthy. That's how I get attention. That's how I get seen. That's how people actually care about me and give love to me. That's when my dad actually gave a shit. And if you don't know that, you'll be doing it unconscious, because remember, this is all happening at the unconscious level and we're bringing all of it into the light, right? And then you have the prostitute, where it's like you're sacrificing your values for way less than what you know is right in order to fit in order for people to like you, in order to keep the status quo. Maybe you use money to keep your friends around. Maybe you have to be in performance to keep your friends around so people like you, right? All of these different archetypal structures that snap online within you and your consciousness. And if you're not aware to see them, you're back in slavery. You're back in Egypt and you don't even realize it. And you're like, why do I keep doing this to myself? Why has it taken so long? Why does it feel like I'm not going anywhere? And then what do? We shame and guilt ourselves for that happening. And we don't realize these are archetypal patterns that we all have, that all got activated as children. And we make it about us. There's something wrong with us. I'm doing it wrong. There's something wrong with me. I'm not as good as them. I'm not okay, right? And then we sink further into victimhood. We think it's about us. And it's simply a pattern, a survival tactic that is trying to keep you alive like it did when you were a kid. And obviously it's not serving your life anymore, right? So this is part of it, right? You're going to have that wandering in the desert period. And just like in the Bible, let's skip over to the experience when Jesus goes out into the desert for the 40 days. Again, let's throw out any religious Bible stuff. Just stay with me, stay in the story, because it's brilliant. Again, it's highlighting the transformational process. He goes out into the desert, Yeshua, and he fasts. He lets go of the fleshly things of the world, the material world, and it's just him with him. And Satan shows up and starts tempting the shit out of him and starts offering him all this stuff of the material world's glamour and glory. And he has to say no. Now, many of us, because we're in somewhat of a fragile state and we don't have that foundation built, we succumb to the temptation. We give in to the distraction. And then we beat ourselves up for it. And then that's what keeps the pattern happening again and again and again, like a revolving door. And we make it mean something about us. And I just got to tell you, it's not about you. This is the journey as souls we all go through. It's archetypal. We all share it. It's not unique to you. It's unique in the way that you pass through it and your story of how you go through that process. But everybody goes through it. Well, I should say not everyone. It's actually very few people. But if you're watching this channel, you came here for this, baby. And you know it. You know it. You wouldn't be watching this otherwise, right? So this is where when you start to deny those temptations and you start to take things less personally and less seriously, and you start allowing yourself to have a little bit more fun, and you can laugh at those patterns that are coming in because you can see them now. You're holding space for them. You got the love. You're like, oh, hey, this was me as a child. All right, cool. Let me be with that. Let me allow that instead of trying to push it away or run from it or scroll on my phone or smoke weed or watch porn or whatever the thing is for you, whatever that vice is, right? This is so important. You got to know this when you're going through this process. There's no way around it. You get the impulse to leave Egypt. You're like, I'm done being a slave. This sucks. I'm not interested in that life. Doing shit that I don't want to do. Wasting my time on things I don't give a fuck about, right? You leave that. And then you got to part the Red Sea, and that's challenging. And then you got to go through the wandering lost desert period, and that's challenging. But the reason that these stories are in the Bible, because it's just highlighting our journey. And Yeshua, Jesus, to me, was just simply I don't want to say it as simple because he was extraordinary, but he also said, you can do as I and more, because he was highlighting, hey, here's what the human potential looks like. You guys can do it too. And what did we do? We were like, oh, form a religion around this guy. Oh, I could never be that. And he's like, no, that's not what I was saying. Come on. But that's what humans do, right? We instead of owning the power and the divine that we have within us, just like he did, we have to pass it off to someone else. And that's also an old archetypal pattern that we're transcending in the Aquarian era, right? So Yeshua was the guy that's like, here's what you guys look like when you're in oneness with the Creator. And this is the process that you go through. Here's what you're able to do. And we need that. We need the way showers. We need the people to set the example, because our belief systems become so rigid of what's possible and what's not possible. Our logic takes over, especially for us who were indoctrinated into the school system, where it just sank us into the left brain and killed the imagination. It killed the imagination. I can tell you from my own experience, I had like cobwebs from my right brain. My imagination was shut down. I was living in black and white. I'm like, this is how it is. And like, just zero humbleness, all arrogance. I know things. Look at me. And it's like, holy shit, you don't know anything. When your imagination starts to come online and this wisdom starts to download, you realize, my goodness, I was operating at a fraction of myself. Wow. And when your whole brain's involved, which is another process that's happening, the intuition marrying the mind, everything starts to shift. And it's spectacular, right? But we need those example showers, just like with Roger Bannister. The moment that he broke the 4-minute mile, there was like 20 people that did it in the next 2 weeks, once we knew it was possible. It's no different, right? You can apply that to so many other things. And now there's nuclear physicists, these extremely left-brain guys that are studying quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and being like, oh shit, reality is not black and white. The imagination is what rules it all, and it's us being creators, and it's the information that we input into our system that dictates the story that gets put out. Ba-boom! Shaboyaka! Something like that. That's how it feels when you start to get this, right? So it's time to start coming back to life and not being a zombie. Again, another very intimate thing that I feel very strongly about, because I was a zombie for a long time. I got really stuck in the desert period. Definitely a little Red Sea period, but like really stuck in the desert, spinning my tires. Obsessed with like, where do I go from here? How do I do this? Blah, 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 right? But what's on the other side of that is your heart's calling. There's nothing to figure out. Everything is guided. You know what to do. Your heart is called to a thing very strongly. And when I finally allowed myself to go through that, that's when I started doing epic stuff. I started leading retreats all across the country, helping people through this process. I started doing ceremonial work with people where my shamanic archetype would come online and cool things would happen that were way beyond me as the small self. That's when I started leading programs, and that's when I started creating events and shooting documentaries and all this other stuff, which was waiting for me. And it's like, this was always who you were. But you just got lost in the desert period, as a lot of the Moses' people did, right? What was it, like 40 years before they got to the promised land? And they doubted and they feared and they questioned Moses, right? So in this process, you've got to cultivate trust. It's the most important thing. I talk about that a lot on this channel, and I'm going to keep talking about it. You got to have it. You can't get through without it. And trust isn't blind. It's knowingness of who you are. It's knowing this hero's journey that you're on is not in vain. It's all leading you somewhere. It's not this random thing where you're just going to be left behind and you're not going to get to the place that you're meant to go. You can't get it wrong, but you can make it long. And that's what I did. It seemed very long. And I remember when a psychic like 10 years ago was like, hey, it's going to take a lot longer than what you think. And I was like, what does this guy know? Like, give me a couple years and I'm there, baby. And sure enough, like 8 years went by and I was like, holy shit, I get it. Wow. All right. Yeah. And why? Because I was addicted to my survival patterns. I could not transcend them, and I refused to get the proper support that I needed. And I tried to do it myself. And yes, we do have to do it ourselves to a degree, but you've got to get support because you can't see these unconscious patterns that you've been steeped in for so long. And that's why I do coaching. That's the only reason I do it, because I love helping people not be stuck in the places that I was. It's a natural thing. I turn around and I help others in those places so that they can start having the experiences that I had when I was living as the true self, when I didn't have the restrictions anymore. It's very natural, and you see a lot of people in the coaching space do it for the same reasons, but a lot of them start too early. They haven't embodied it, and it's a little bit more superficial. It comes from a good place, but it's not. It doesn't have that depth because they haven't like fully gone through that whole process. I speak to you very much having gone through that. Now, is there times where the desert comes back in? By the way, there's levels of this, right? I will have another desert level. I had one recently. You will too. Because when you're ready to go to the next place, it's like it's like a little mini kind of start over of that same journey again, right? That part will come in. That part that's like, oh, this is like, this was your baseline. You got to stay there. And then it's like, all right, time to level up. Got to go through that process. Got to die to those parts. Got to, have this period of fasting and not letting distractions come in, and be with the wisdom that's starting to flow in through my intuition, right? Okay. That's a lot of info there, but the energy was strong, and I hope that really downloaded for you. And if you need the support, get it. I don't care if it's with me. I love doing this. You're here for a reason, but also like that, in that capacity for deep one-on-one work, I don't have many spaces. I have a couple spaces open for that for my calendar starting in September, end of August. But really, what I want to highlight here is I'm starting a mastermind So there's going to be a whole group of us, amplified energy, that are going through this process together. We are going to face off with our survival archetypes. We're going to integrate them. We're going to embody this stuff. So by the end of the mastermind, you are going to feel like you are operating at a new level of awareness that you never even could have imagined, that you are in this place of power and possibility of like, oh yeah, I can have these desires. All right, yeah, I'm living life on my terms, right? Where you're not wandering lost in the desert. We're all as a group going where we need to go. We're telling the truth that we need to tell. Very powerful stuff, guys. And that's going to be, the signups for that are going to be coming. Look for that in the description. And also, if you're called to the intimate one-on-one space, that link is also in the description. There's no time to waste, guys. Like, we're in it. The story's moving fast right now. You know this. AI is going on. Everything's changing very quickly. And it's not something to be scared about. It's something that's actually here to serve you and give you the push that you need to go where you're meant to go. I love you guys. Peace within is peace without. I will see you very soon.